Lieutenant Sam Warren opened his eyes to the harsh beeping of his alarm. He groaned and slapped the off button with more force than necessary. The clock read 600 hours. Another day aboard the USS Horizon, the flagship of the United Earth Alliance, but something felt different today. Something felt wrong. Sam swung his legs over the side of his bed and shuffled to the small kitchen area of his quarters. He pressed the button on his coffee machine, hoping the familiar aroma would help clear his mind. Nothing happened. He pressed it again. Still nothing. After checking the power connection and water reservoir, he determined the machine was completely broken. Perfect, Sam muttered. Just perfect. He moved to the small tank on his desk where Jerry, his betta fish, usually swam excitedly when he approached. The fish floated motionless at the top of the water. Sam closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Jerry had been with him for 3 years, a reminder of Earth and normalcy in the vastness of space. "I'm sorry, buddy," he whispered, tapping the glass gently. "We had a good run." Sam's personal communicator beeped. A message from Earth. He opened it and felt his heart sink even further. His grandfather, retired Colonel William Warren, had passed away peacefully in his sleep. The funeral would be next week. Too soon for Sam to make it back to Earth from their current position near the Zaltari border. Colonel Warren had been Sam's hero, the reason he joined the Alliance in the first place. The old man had raised him after his parents died in the Mars colony disaster. And now Sam couldn't even say goodbye. He sat heavily on his bed, the message still glowing on the screen. After several minutes, he composed himself enough to request personal leave. It would take time to process, but at least he could arrange to attend the memorial service in a month. Sam showered and dressed in his uniform, movements mechanical. He skipped breakfast, his appetite gone, and headed to his duty station. The corridors of the Horizon seemed unusually bright and noisy. Every laugh and conversation grated on his nerves. "Lieutenant Warren, report to Admiral Fuller's office immediately," came the announcement over his personal comm. Sam changed direction and headed toward the command deck. When he entered the Admiral's office, he stood at attention despite his internal turmoil. "At ease, Lieutenant," Admiral Diane Fuller said, not looking up from her display. She was a stern woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. "I've called you here because we have a situation." "Yes, Admiral," Sam said, his voice steadier than he felt. "The Zaltari Federation has finally agreed to alliance talks. Their diplomatic vessel will dock in 3 hours. Sam nodded. The Zaltari were notoriously formal and difficult to negotiate with. Their species valued emotional control above all else. "You'll be representing humanity in these talks," Admiral Fuller continued. Sam blinked in surprise. "Ma'am, I've just submitted a request for personal leave. My grandfather passed away this morning." The Admiral finally looked up at him, her expression softening for just a moment before returning to its professional mask. "I'm sorry for your loss, Lieutenant, but this is too important. The Voidborn Empire is expanding, and we need the Zaltari's advanced weapons technology. With all due respect, Admiral, I'm not in the right state of mind for—" "You're our foremost expert on Zaltari culture," she interrupted. "No one else has your level of understanding of their customs and protocols. The talks begin at 1100 hours. That gives you time to prepare." Sam wanted to argue, to explain that he couldn't possibly maintain the perfect composure the Zaltari expected when his world was crumbling around him. But years of military discipline held his tongue. "Yes, Admiral," he said instead. "Dismissed, Lieutenant. And Warren?" She paused. "Make us proud." Sam left the office, his chest tight with unexpressed grief and frustration. The worst day of his life had just begun, and apparently the fate of the human Zaltari alliance now rested on his shoulders. Sam arrived 15 minutes late to the pre-meeting briefing. His hair was combed but not perfectly in place. His uniform, while clean, had a small coffee stain near the collar from where he had finally gotten a cup from the mess hall, only to have someone bump into him. Everyone in the room turned to look at him as he entered. "Nice of you to join us, Lieutenant Warren," Admiral Fuller said, her voice cold. Sam mumbled an apology and took a seat next to Communications Officer Kevin Peters, who gave him a concerned look. On his other side sat Lisa Morgan, the ship's cultural specialist. She slid her tablet toward him with the briefing notes. "You okay?" Kevin whispered. "You look terrible." "I'm fine," Sam said sharply, then immediately regretted his tone. "Sorry, bad morning." Lisa leaned closer. "If you need to talk after this—" "I said I'm fine," Sam interrupted, focusing on the Admiral who was explaining the protocol for greeting. The Zaltari delegates. Their delegation will consist of Ambassador Krexva, 3 senior diplomats, and their cultural interpreter Nivta, Admiral Fuller said. "Remember, the Zaltari value precision, cleanliness, and emotional control above all else. Any display of strong emotion could jeopardize these talks." Sam felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. Of all days to need perfect emotional control, this had to be the worst. He tried to focus on his breathing, using techniques he had learned during his training. The briefing continued for another 30 minutes. Sam absorbed almost none of it, his mind constantly drifting to thoughts of his grandfather and the funeral he would miss. By the time they were dismissed to prepare for the actual meeting, Sam felt like he was walking through a fog. "Lieutenant Warren, a moment, please," Lisa called after him as they left the briefing room. Sam paused, allowing her to catch up. "Look, I don't mean to pry, but something's clearly wrong," she said. "And if you're going to be face-to-face with the Zaltari—" "I appreciate the concern," Sam said, cutting her off. "But I need to maintain professionalism. We all have bad days." Before Lisa could respond, an announcement came over the ship's comm system. "Zaltari diplomatic vessel docking complete. Honor guard to docking bay 3. Sam checked his appearance once more in the reflection of a display panel, straightened his uniform, and headed toward the docking bay. He arrived just as the airlock opened to reveal the Zaltari delegation. The Zaltari were tall, slender beings with blue-tinted skin and large, almond-shaped eyes. They moved with deliberate grace, every gesture seemingly calculated. Ambassador. Krexva led the group, his elaborate robes marking his high status. The interpreter, Nivta, was dressed more simply but carried herself with the same measured dignity. "Welcome aboard the USS Horizon," Admiral Fuller said, performing the traditional Zaltari greeting gesture, right hand over heart, then extended palm up. The Zaltari returned the gesture perfectly. Then Ambassador Krexva's eyes landed on Sam, narrowing slightly. "This is Lieutenant Sam Warren, our expert on Zaltari culture and your primary contact for these negotiations," the Admiral said. Sam stepped forward and performed the greeting. He noticed the slight twitch in Ambassador Krexva's expression, a sign of disapproval that most humans would miss. But Sam's training had taught him to recognize. "Your uniform is imperfect," the ambassador said flatly in accented English. "Does humanity not value precision in appearance?" Sam felt heat rise to his face. "My apologies, Ambassador. It has been a challenging morning." The interpreter, Nivta, tilted her head slightly as she studied Sam's face. She then whispered something to Lisa in the Zaltari language. Lisa's eyes widened slightly. As they walked toward the conference room, Lisa fell into step beside Sam. "Nivta says you're showing signs of mind poison," she whispered urgently. "That's their term for negative emotions. She says the ambassador can sense it." Sam swallowed hard. "I'll handle it." Lisa looked like she wanted to say more, but they had reached the conference room. As the doors opened, Sam took a deep breath and prepared to face the most challenging diplomatic meeting of his career, with the worst possible mindset. The conference room of the USS Horizon had been specially prepared for the Zaltari delegation. The lighting was dimmed to accommodate their sensitive eyes. The temperature was lowered to match their home world. The chairs were arranged in perfect symmetry around the oval table. Despite these efforts to create comfort, the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Sam sat across from Ambassador Krexva, trying not to fidget. The formal introductions had already taken 20 minutes, with each Zaltari stating their full title and lineage. Now it was the humans' turn, and Admiral Fuller was going through the same process with painful slowness. and to my right is Lieutenant Samuel Warren, Cultural Liaison Officer, graduate of the Alliance Diplomatic Corps, son of John and Mary Warren, grandson of Colonel William Warren, said the Admiral. At the mention of his grandfather, Sam felt his throat tighten. He forced himself to maintain a neutral expression, but his hand clenched into a fist under the table. Ambassador Kreksova noticed. Those large, alien eyes missed nothing. Your grandfather? He was a warrior? The ambassador asked, interrupting. The protocol. Sam blinked in surprise. The Zaltari never deviated from formal procedures. Yes, Ambassador. He served in the Battle of Ceres and the Mars Defense Campaign. And he lives with honor still? The question was pointed, almost as if the ambassador already knew the answer. Sam hesitated, feeling all eyes on him. He passed away this morning, Ambassador. A murmur went through the Zaltari delegation. Ambassador Kreksova's expression didn't change, but he leaned forward slightly. Yet you attend these talks rather than observe your species' mourning rituals. Curious, he said. Are diplomatic relations so important to humans that personal loss is irrelevant? Admiral Fuller shot Sam a warning glance. This was dangerous territory. All members of the Alliance understand that duty sometimes requires personal sacrifice, Sam replied carefully. Indeed, Ambassador Kreksova said. The question becomes, does such sacrifice strengthen your species, or does it create weakness? Through emotional instability? Sam felt a flare of anger. Was the ambassador deliberately provoking him? He took a deep breath before responding. Humans believe that experiencing emotions, even difficult ones, gives us insight and empathy. These are valuable traits in diplomacy. Perhaps, the ambassador said dismissively, though one might argue that true diplomatic skill lies in setting aside such emotional attachments entirely. Admiral Fuller quickly steered the conversation back to safer ground. Let's move on to the proposed terms of the alliance, shall we? The next hour dragged on as they discussed defense pacts and trade agreements. Sam struggled to focus. Every time he thought he had his emotions under control, another wave of grief would hit him. He kept his responses short and precise, trying not to give the ambassador more ammunition. During a brief discussion of military cooperation, the ambassador made a pointed comment. The Void-born Empire attacks without emotion or hesitation. One wonders if humans, with their emotional attachments, could respond with sufficient decisiveness in a crisis. Sam's patience was wearing thin. Emotion does not prevent action, Ambassador. In fact, protecting those we care about often drives humans to act more decisively. An interesting theory, Ambassador Kreksova said with what seemed like amusement. Though your species' history suggests otherwise. Emotional decisions often lead to regrettable outcomes. Before Sam could respond, Admiral Fuller announced a lunch break. We'll reconvene in 1 hour, she said, her tone making it clear that the break was non-negotiable. As everyone began to stand, Ambassador Kreksova moved with surprising speed to intercept Sam before he could leave. Lieutenant Warren, might I have a private word? The ambassador asked, though it was clearly not a request. Sam glanced at Admiral Fuller, who gave a small nod of approval despite the concern in her eyes. Of course, Ambassador, Sam said, his stomach knotting with tension as the others filed out of the room, leaving him alone with the Zaltari diplomat. The conference room felt colder now that it was empty, except for Sam and Ambassador Kreksova. The Zaltari moved to the viewport, gazing out at the stars with his back to Sam. For a long moment, neither spoke. Do you know why the Zaltari Federation has avoided alliances with humans for so long, Lieutenant Warren? The ambassador finally asked. Sam remained standing at attention. Official records cite cultural incompatibility. Yes, cultural incompatibility. Ambassador Kreksova turned to face Sam. A diplomatic way of saying we find your species emotionally unpredictable. With respect, Ambassador, all species have emotions, even the Zaltari. The difference, Kreksova said sharply, is that we control ours. We do not allow them to control us. He moved closer to Sam. Which brings me to the purpose of today's meeting. Sam frowned. I thought the purpose was to discuss an alliance against the Voidborn Empire. That is the stated purpose, yes. The ambassador's large eyes studied Sam's face. The real purpose was to test whether humans can be trusted in times of crisis. And you, Lieutenant Warren, were specifically chosen. Sam felt a chill run down his spine. Chosen? For what? To represent humanity under pressure. Ambassador Krexva walked slowly around Sam. We have been monitoring your communications. We know about your grandfather. We know about your request for leave that was denied. Anger flared in Sam's chest. You've been spying on private communications? The ambassador waved his hand dismissively. Standard diplomatic procedure. We needed to observe how humans handle personal crisis while maintaining professional duties. His voice grew colder. So far, you have proven our concerns valid. Sam struggled to keep his voice level. You deliberately orchestrated this? On the day my grandfather died? The timing was fortunate for our test, Ambassador Krexva admitted without shame. Your emotions are dangerously close to the surface, Lieutenant. By Zaltari standards, you would be removed from duty until you regained control. Something snapped inside Sam. All the grief, frustration, and anger he'd been suppressing burst through his professional facade. You know what, Ambassador? You're right. I am emotional today. My grandfather raised me after my parents died. He was the reason I joined the Alliance, and yes, I'm grieving. Sam stepped closer to the Zaltari. But here's what you don't understand. Humans don't become stronger by ignoring our emotions. We become stronger by experiencing them and continuing anyway. The ambassador's eyes widened slightly. You think emotional control is a sign of strength? Sam continued, his voice rising. I call it a weakness. When the Voidborn attacked your outer colonies last month, did your perfect emotional control save those people? Or did it just let you file it away as an acceptable loss? The ambassador stiffened. How do you know about those attacks? That information was not shared with the Alliance. Sam hadn't meant to reveal his knowledge of the classified intelligence, but it was too late now. We have our sources too. And unlike you, we were actually concerned about the lives lost. For the first time, the ambassador seemed genuinely surprised. Behind him, the conference room door slid open. Several of the junior Zaltari diplomats had returned early and were watching the exchange with what looked like fascination. You speak to me with disrespect, Ambassador Krexva said, but his voice lacked conviction. I speak to you with honesty, Sam replied. Something this process has been sorely lacking. If you want to know if humans can be trusted in a crisis, then see us as we really are. We feel deeply, we grieve, we get angry, and then we channel those emotions into protecting what matters. One of the younger Zaltari diplomats stepped forward, ignoring a warning glance from the ambassador. You channel your emotions rather than suppress them? She asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Before Sam could answer, Admiral Fuller and the rest of both delegations returned. The Admiral took one look at Sam's face and the strange tableau before her, and her expression shifted to one of alarm. Is everything all right? She asked carefully. Ambassador Krexva turned to her with an unreadable expression. No, Admiral. I believe everything is about to change. The atmosphere in the conference room had completely changed when everyone returned to their seats. Admiral Fuller kept glancing nervously between Sam and Ambassador Krexva. The rest of the human delegation seemed confused by the tension. This how? Zaltari diplomats were whispering among themselves, breaking their usual strict protocol. Let us continue the talks, Ambassador Krexva said finally. Admiral Fuller nodded. Yes, of course. We were discussing the terms of military cooperation. Actually, Sam interrupted, earning a sharp look from the Admiral. I think we need to discuss something more fundamental first. A silence fell over the room. Sam knew he was breaking every rule of diplomacy, but he couldn't stop now. Lieutenant Warren, Admiral Fuller warned. Sam turned to face the entire Zaltari delegation. You've all been testing us, judging whether humans are too emotional to be reliable allies, but you've been asking the wrong question. The young female Zaltari diplomat who had spoken earlier leaned forward with interest. Ambassador Krexva's face remained impassive, but he did not interrupt. The question isn't whether we can control our emotions like you do, Sam continued. It's whether emotion itself can be a strength rather than a weakness. Sam stood up and walked to the center of the room. My grandfather fought in the Battle of Ceres. He once told me that he wasn't fighting for abstract concepts like humanity or territory. He fought because he had a picture of his family in his helmet. He fought because he loved, because he feared losing them, because he hoped for a better future. Several of the younger Zaltari were now watching him intently. Humans don't compartmentalize our feelings. We channel them. Grief drives us to prevent more losses. Love drives us to protect. Even anger can be focused into determination. Sam looked directly at Ambassador Krexva. When the Voidborn attacked your Omicron colony last month, they killed 15,000 Zaltari. Your official response was measured, calculated, and ultimately ineffective. Gasps came from both delegations. This information was supposed to be classified. How did you? Admiral Fuller began. Because I cared, Sam said simply. Because when I heard rumors of the attack while studying your culture, I couldn't just file it away as not my problem. I dug deeper, I made connections, I followed leads, driven by concern for people I've never even met. The room was completely silent now. The Voidborn are expanding toward both our territories, Sam continued. They don't negotiate, they don't feel remorse. They are truly emotionless in a way that even Zaltari are not. And that is why they will lose against an alliance of humans and Zaltari. He turned to fully face the Zaltari delegation. You value control. We value connection. Together we could be something neither of us can be alone. The young female Zaltari diplomat suddenly spoke. I lost my birth sister on Omicron colony. Her voice trembled slightly, a shocking display by Zaltari standards. Our leaders told us to accept the loss with dignity, to control our response. Ambassador, Krexva looked alarmed. Diplomat Mevra, this is not appropriate. Is it not? Mevra challenged. For years we have suppressed what you call mind poison. But I have studied human history. Their greatest achievements often come from their deepest emotions. She looked at Sam. You felt concern for our losses when your own leaders did not even inform you of them. Why? Sam thought of his grandfather. Because loss is universal. Grief is something we all share, across species. My grandfather taught me that reaching out to others in their pain creates bonds stronger than any treaty. Admiral Fuller looked like she was about to have a heart attack. This was not how diplomatic talks were supposed to go. But several of the Zaltari diplomats were nodding slowly. Ambassador Krexva stood abruptly. This meeting will adjourn for 1 hour. His voice was tightly controlled, but Sam could see something had shifted in his demeanor. As the Zaltari filed out, Mevra paused beside Sam. Your mind poison, she whispered, using the Zaltari term for negative emotion. It spreads like fire, but perhaps some things need to burn. As soon as the Zaltari left the room, Admiral Fuller rounded on Sam. Her face was red with anger, but she kept her voice low. Lieutenant Warren, what do you think you're doing? You've completely abandoned protocol. You revealed classified intelligence. You've likely ruined years of careful diplomacy. Sam stood his ground. With respect, Admiral, the old approach wasn't working. The Zaltari were testing us, and they would have rejected the alliance if we continued with diplomatic pretense. Kevin, Peters, the communications officer, cleared his throat nervously. He might be right, Admiral. I've never seen the Zaltari break protocol like that before. Especially that younger diplomat, Mevra. That doesn't excuse insubordination, Admiral Fuller said through clenched teeth. She pointed at the door. Wait outside, Lieutenant. We'll discuss your future in Starfleet after we somehow salvage these talks. Sam nodded stiffly and left the conference room. In the corridor, he leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. Had he just destroyed his career? Probably. But strangely, he felt calmer than he had all day. Speaking honestly about his grandfathers, death had lifted some of the weight from his chest. From around the corner, he heard raised voices, speaking in the complex clicks and whistles of the Zaltari language. Sam moved closer, his training in their language allowing him to understand parts of the heated exchange. Breaking all tradition. That was Ambassador Krexva's voice. Perhaps tradition needs breaking, Mevra responded. The old ways failed, to protect Omicron colony. Control is our strength, another voice insisted. Control did not save my birth sister, Mevra shot back. While we calculated the appropriate response, the Voidborn moved to another colony. The human speaks truth. Their emotional way drives action. The argument continued, growing louder. Sam had never heard Zaltari raise their voices before. Their society was built on rigid control and hierarchy. What he was witnessing was unprecedented. The door to the conference room opened and Lisa Morgan stepped out. She looked surprised to see Sam listening to the Zaltari argument. "Admiral sent me to find you," she said quietly. "What's happening? Over there?" "I think the Zaltari delegation is having its own emotional breakthrough," Sam replied. Lisa raised her eyebrows. "That's not possible. The Zaltari don't do emotional breakthroughs. They're fighting about tradition versus change, about whether emotional control has served them well against the Voidborn." Before Lisa could respond, the Zaltari voices suddenly stopped. A moment later, Ambassador Krexva rounded the corner, followed by the rest of his delegation. The ambassador's usually perfect posture was slightly stooped, and his blue-tinted skin seemed paler than before. "Lieutenant Warren," he said, his voice oddly subdued. "Your words have caused disagreement among us." Sam straightened up. "I apologize if I've given offense, Ambassador." "Offense is an emotional response," the ambassador replied, "one that I am currently struggling to control." He looked genuinely shaken. "We must return to our vessel for consultation." Mevra stepped forward. "Ambassador, I request permission to remain and speak with the human delegation." Ambassador Krexva stared at her for a long moment. "Such a request violates protocol." "Yes," she agreed simply. To Sam's surprise, the ambassador nodded slowly. "Very well. 1 hour, no binding agreements." With that, he led the rest of the delegation away. Admiral Fuller emerged from the conference room, clearly surprised to see only Mevra remaining. "Ambassador Krexva has left?" "My delegation requires time for internal discussion," Mevra said. Then, in a very human gesture, she smiled faintly. "It seems Lieutenant Warren's mind poison is contagious. Our younger diplomats are experiencing feelings they were taught to suppress about the Voidborn attacks." Sam met her eyes. "And what are you feeling, Diplomat Mevra?" She hesitated, then answered in a whisper. "Anger, grief, and perhaps hope." She looked directly at Admiral Fuller. "Your lieutenant has made us question centuries of tradition in a single day. It is most uncomfortable." Admiral Fuller shook her head in disbelief. "Are you saying he hasn't ruined the negotiations?" "Quite the opposite," Mevra replied. "I believe he may have just made them real for the first time." Sam sat alone in his quarters, staring at the official reprimand on his tablet. Admiral Fuller had relieved him of duty immediately after the Zaltari delegation departed. The document cited gross violation of diplomatic protocol and unauthorized disclosure of classified intelligence. At the bottom was a note that further disciplinary action would be determined after the diplomatic mission concluded. He should have felt worried about his career, but all he could think about was his grandfather. The old colonel would have probably laughed at the situation. "Sometimes you have to break the rules to do what's right," he used to say. Sam's door chimed. "Enter," he called. Lisa Morgan stepped into his quarters looking slightly out of breath. "You need to come back to the conference room now." "I'm relieved of duty, remember?" Sam said. "Admiral Fuller just sent me to get you. The Zaltari are back." Lisa's eyes were wide. "Something's different. They've changed their seating arrangement." That got Sam's attention. Zaltari seating positions were determined by strict hierarchy and never changed during a diplomatic mission. Changed how? "Mevra is sitting in the ambassador's place," Lisa said. "And they're asking for you specifically." Sam jumped to his feet. "Let's go." They hurried through the corridors of the USS Horizon. When they reached the conference room, Sam was surprised to see the door guarded by Zaltari security instead of human officers. Inside, the scene was unlike any diplomatic meeting Sam had ever witnessed. The Zaltari delegation sat on one side of the table, but as Lisa had said, their traditional hierarchy was rearranged. Mevra occupied the central position, with Ambassador Krexva sitting to her right. The ambassador looked tired, his usual, perfect posture slightly slumped. Admiral Fuller and the human delegation sat opposite them, expressions ranging from confused to concerned. "Lieutenant Warren," Mevra said as he entered, "please join us." Sam took a seat next to the admiral, who shot him a warning glance. Mevra spoke clearly. "After extensive discussion, the Zaltari delegation has undergone what you might call a restructuring." "I don't understand," Admiral Fuller said cautiously. "For centuries, our diplomatic corps has been led by those who best exemplify emotional control," Mevra explained. "But the void-born threat has proven that this approach may be insufficient. Ambassador Krexva has temporarily ceded leadership to me." The admiral looked stunned. "May I ask why?" Mevra glanced at Sam. Lieutenant Warren's emotional honesty revealed a fundamental misunderstanding between our species. We believed humans controlled emotions as we do, suppressing them to function. Now we see that you channel them instead. She paused. "We wish to learn this approach." Sam couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You want to learn to be more emotional?" "We want to learn to use emotion as a strength as you do," Mevra clarified. "The Voidborn are truly emotionless. They calculate, they conquer, they consume. Against such an enemy, perhaps your human approach has merit." Admiral Fuller seemed to be struggling to process this turn of events. "And what does this mean for our alliance discussions?" "It means," Ambassador Krexva spoke for the first time, his voice subdued, "that we offer more than a simple military alliance. We propose integrated operations. Human emotional intelligence paired with Zaltari precision." Mevra nodded. "Your Lieutenant Warren's grief over his grandfather drove him to learn things about our colonies that even some of our own people did not know. His empathy for our losses created a connection that formal diplomacy could not." She slid a data crystal across the table. "We offer full technical specifications for our defense systems. In exchange, we request human instructors to teach our military personnel about emotional processing and response." Admiral Fuller picked up the crystal, carefully, as if it might disappear. "This is unprecedented." "As is today's meeting," Mevra agreed. She looked directly at Sam. "Lieutenant Warren's grandfather was a warrior, yes?" Sam nodded. "One of the best. Then perhaps his death has served a greater purpose than anyone could have foreseen. It created the conditions for a stronger alliance than we might have otherwise achieved." She touched her hand to her heart in a gesture of respect. "In Zaltari tradition, there is no greater honor than for one's ending to create a new beginning." For the first time since hearing the news of his grandfather's death, Sam felt tears well in his eyes. He didn't try to hide them. 1 month later, Sam stood on the observation deck of the USS Horizon. Below him, the massive shipyard bustled, with activity as the first joint human Zaltari fleet assembled. 5 sleek Zaltari vessels with their distinctive blue hull plating moved into formation alongside 3 bulkier Alliance cruisers. It was an impressive sight, but one that few would have believed possible just 30 days ago. Sam's new insignia felt strange on his collar. The formal reprimand had mysteriously vanished from his record, replaced by a promotion to lieutenant commander. His new title was even stranger: Cultural Integration Officer. "Quite a view, isn't it?" Admiral Fuller's voice came from behind him. Sam turned and stood at attention. "Yes, Admiral." "At ease, Commander," she said, moving to stand beside him at the viewport. For a moment they both watched the fleet in silence. "I never did apologize," the Admiral said finally, "for making you attend those talks. If I had known about your grandfather." "It all worked out in the end," Sam said. He smiled slightly. though I wouldn't recommend it as a diplomatic strategy. Admiral Fuller laughed softly. No. Make sure your diplomat is having the worst day of their life. Isn't going in the official manual. Her expression grew more serious. I was wrong that day. And I'm sorry about your grandfather. He sounds like he was a good man. He was, Sam agreed. He would have loved to see this. He gestured to the fleet below. The observation deck door slid open, and Mevra entered. She wore the traditional robes of a Zaltari high diplomat now, but there was something different about her. She carried herself with less rigid formality than before. Lieutenant Commander Warren, she greeted him. Admiral Fuller. How are the new crews adapting? The Admiral asked. There have been adjustments, Mevra admitted. But your training programs are effective. Our people are learning to work together. Sam had spent the past month helping design integration protocols for the mixed crews. Each ship now had both human and Zaltari personnel, combining the strengths of both species. And how is Ambassador Krexva? Sam asked. The former lead diplomat had returned to the Zaltari homeworld after the successful treaty signing. He has joined the Council of Elders, Mevra said. His experience has proven valuable as we reform certain traditions. She reached into a pocket of her robe and pulled out a small object. I have something for you. She handed Sam a small blue crystal carved in the shape of a star. This is a Zaltari memory stone. We use them to commemorate those who have passed beyond. Sam held the crystal carefully. Thank you. I made it for your grandfather, Mevra explained. Without his influence on you and without your grief that day, our peoples might never have truly understood each other. Sam felt a lump in his throat. He would be honored. The three of them turned back to the viewport as the fleet began to move. The ships would patrol the border between Alliance space and Voidborn territory, the first line of defense against the coming storm. The Voidborn will attack again soon, Admiral Fuller said quietly. Our intelligence suggests they're massing for a major offensive. They will find us ready, Mevra said with a conviction that would have been considered inappropriately emotional in traditional Zaltari culture. Sam pocketed the memory stone. We should go. The strategy meeting starts in 10 minutes. As they walked together toward the command deck, Sam noticed something that made him smile. A young Zaltari officer was talking with a human engineer in the corridor. The Zaltari was speaking openly about feeling nervous before his first deployment. Instead of showing shock at this emotional display, the human was nodding sympathetically, offering reassurance. Something amusing, Commander? Mevra asked. Not amusing, Sam replied. Hopeful. My grandfather used to say that understanding comes from sharing our stories, even the painful ones. Your grandfather was wise, Mevra said. Sam touched the memory stone in his pocket. Yes, he was. And I think he would be proud to see that sometimes even a really bad day can change the course of history.